Are you comfortable? You want to situate the microphone where it feels comfortable?
Okay.
Thanks. I think I keep pointing to that one, but I think it's actually the one in front of you that might be picking up the sound. So thank you. May I ask how old you are?
33.
Have you always lived in this area?
No.
Okay. How long have you lived in the Brown County area?
On and off, a few years. I've been here for about 5 years now, solid.
Okay. And do you have family in the area?
Not immediate area, no.
Okay. Did you know a Nicole VanderHeyden?
Yes.
Do you remember approximately when you met her?
At this point, probably like 3-ish years ago.
Okay. And do you remember where you were when you met?
Mutual friend. I actually walked into her work and was introduced to her. And then through a mutual friend, and then we became friends and started working together.
At some point in time, were you working in a restaurant together?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at some point in time, did you meet a Douglas Detrie?
Never formally introduced, just in passing.
Okay. So, did you know Nicole before you met Douglas Detrie?
Yes.
And do you call her Nikki?
Yes.
Okay. So, did you become pretty good friends, you and Nikki?
Yeah, decently good friends, yes.
Did sometimes you care for her child?
Yes.
Were you aware that she had children?
Yes.
And did you know them?
Yes.
Did you babysit all three, or?
Just Dylan.
Okay. And Dylan would be her youngest, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know how often, approximately, you babysat Dylan?
It was roughly 2 months prior to this incident.
Okay. And the incident would mean Nicole's passing, is that correct?
Correct.
So roughly, if this all took place in May, maybe a couple months before that you babysat?
That I was watching him. That I started watching him.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, had that babysitting usually taken place at your residence?
Yes.
Okay.
Always.
Okay. Was there one evening in May of 2016 that you agreed to babysit that you were going to come to Nicole and Douglas's residence?
Yes.
Did you know where they were going that night, if you knew?
The watering hole for a show, concert of some sort. I wasn't familiar with the band itself.
Okay. Did you work elsewhere that night?
I worked that evening, yes.
And would that have been at the restaurant you were working at?
Correct.
Do you remember about what time you got off?
Around 10:30, a little after 10:30.
Okay, and that would be in the evening?
Correct.
Did you know the arrangements? Was someone else watching in the meantime till you got there?
Yes, her mother. I drove to the house and then relieved her mother, who was previously watching Dylan.
Okay, so you stayed in touch with the mother, let her know when you were coming over?
And Nikki, yes.
Okay, and then do you remember about what time you got to Nicole's house?
She was about 5 minutes from the restaurant. I would say roughly 10:40-ish.
Okay. And Nikki's mom was still there, of course.
Correct.
Did she take off right away?
We exchanged a few words, and I changed out of my work clothes, and then she had taken off, yes.
Okay. So then you took over responsibilities for Dylan, is that correct?
Correct.
Did he sleep for a good portion of that time?
Yes.
It wasn't too tough a duty at that point?
Not at all.
Okay. At some point in time, did Doug Detrie return to the residence?
Yes.
Do you remember approximately when that was?
Roughly in 2:40 a.m. I was woken up.
Okay. Were you in the living room, a bedroom?
I was sleeping on the long couch.
Okay.
Correct. In the living room.
I take it Dylan was asleep also?
Dylan was asleep in his bassinet upstairs. I had put him upstairs at this point.
Okay. What room was he in?
I believe his room, there was a bassinet and a bed in there, so I believe it was their room, also his room.
Okay.
They'd shared.
So did Doug arrive by himself at this time?
He was with a friend,
Okay. Did you catch that person's name?
Greg.
Had you ever met Greg before?
No.
Now, you had seen a few times Doug Detrie before this, at
I'd
least?
say about 3 to 4 times with them going out to dinner or just in passing, and he came to pick up Dylan once from my house, so just very brief.
Okay. So did you stay very long after that?
There was conversation, maybe about 20 minutes.
And was Greg still there when you left?
No. Greg had left. In the process of me trying to leave, Greg had wanted to get out of there before I left. He said he needed to get home, and he rushed out the door.
Okay, so they arrived approximately 2:40 a.m., and then Greg left before you did.
Correct. There was conversation with all of us, though, sitting around just trying to figure out where she was or where she could have been.
Okay, so you had become aware that Nikki was obviously not there, correct?
Correct.
And at any point in time, did Doug ask you to do anything to try to find her?
He said to keep calling her, call her phone, and yeah, keep calling her.
And did you do so?
I did.
Were you successful in contacting her?
No, the phone was off every time. I kept stating that the phone is dead, the phone is off.
Now, could you tell if these two had been drinking when you saw them?
They were out. I mean, I can't say if they were intoxicated. They're very large men, but they're loud and,
Okay.
concerned.
And they seem concerned to you at this point in time?
Yeah.
Do you know how many times while you were there that you reached out and tried to contact Nikki?
I would say at least 4 times, 3 or 4 times. From my phone, just in conversation, and while we were there talking, I had called.
So you indicated that you made those efforts. At some point in time, did Doug show you some texts that he'd received from Nikki?
He showed me a telephone, and he said that they had gotten in an argument, and this is kind of what it was. And he presented me the phone, and it was a conversation back and forth between a male and a female of obviously a jealousy banter.
Was the phrase something where she's responding to him, go talk to your whores?
Something of the sort, yes. I'm not sure who it came from, but the message was across, like, just go be with your whores. Yeah.
Okay. And did you indicate when you relayed this information to the police that it looked like Doug was trying to calm her down after this?
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I don't know that I've said that.
There was a statement that you gave, this was some time ago. Was it a little easier to remember it then than you do now?
No.
Okay. So you don't...
I don't recall him trying to calm her down. It was just showing me the text message that they got into an argument. I wasn't trying to be involved. I handed him the phone back and was just kind of like, shit happens.
Okay. But at that point in time, is it correct, Doug told you he was very concerned?
He was.
You ended up leaving then, I take it. You indicated that as well. You drove there? Is that how you got there?
Correct.
And after you left, sometime later, did you receive another message from Doug?
Yes. When I had left the house after we had talked for a little while, I left the house, I got into my car, and when I was driving home, he had called me again, probably, I would say, 4 to 5 minutes later from leaving his house.
And did he use Facebook Messenger?
Yes, he did not have my telephone number.
And what is a Facebook Messenger?
It's where you can call people if you're friends with them on Facebook, I believe, or somehow to get in touch with them.
Okay. And so you know how to use that particular...
No, I was very new at it as well. I had just put my phone number on there 2 days prior, and he was the only first person to ever call me from there.
Okay. But you did receive a phone contact then?
Yes.
And do you remember what area you were in at that point in time when you received that?
I was directly on Libel Street in front of the Chase Bank when he called me.
Okay. And at that point in time, did he ask you to do anything further?
He asked me where Dylan was.
Okay.
He asked where the baby was. At first he said, keep calling Nikki. Keep calling Nikki. Is her phone off? Keep calling her. And where's Dylan? And I'm like, he's in his room. And then he didn't go any further from there. He continued to say, keep calling her. I said, I will. Just have a good night. And then I said, did you find Dylan? And he's like, oh, yeah, I have him.
Okay. So then did you drive directly home?
Correct.
Approximately how many minutes is it from their residence to yours?
Maybe about 15.
How much do you want to go in with tomorrow? Now, the next morning, is it correct, you both had contact back and forth, still inquiring, had you reached out to Nikki, is that correct?
Yes.
And you both had some repeated contact back and forth indicating attempts to find Nikki?
Yes.
No further questions, thank you.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you, Judge. How are you today, Dallas?
Good. Hi.
Thanks. So you said you've lived in this area for roughly 5 years?
Yes, like same extent of time, yes.
How many kids do you have?
1.
And how old is he?
4.
And where do you work now?
The Blue Opus.
And then focusing in 2016, where were you working?
Ogan Restaurant.
And you were working with Nikki then?
Correct.
And did you work anywhere else at that time?
No, I just worked there at the moment, yeah.
But you were pretty busy as a full-time mom, full-time job.
Yeah. Life.
And then you met Nikki through a mutual friend?
Yes.
And you had met Nikki 5 to 6 months before working with her?
I would say about that, yes.
And you got along pretty well with Nikki?
Instantly, yes.
Can you tell the jury some of the similar interests that you had with Nikki?
We just had children. She was a bubbly personality. We worked out, just fun activities. I don't know, just girlfriends hanging out, just being friends. Yeah.
And you knew Nikki before she met Doug?
Correct. Just a little before. I'd say a few months before.
And Nikki had become pregnant soon after she first met Doug, correct?
Correct.
Can you describe Nikki for us?
She just was a light. She's always smiling, just happy.
And you were able to connect with that?
Mm-hmm.
And you grew closer with her over time?
Yeah, we just shared a lot together, single parents and whatnot.
And you started to spend time together outside of work as well?
Correct, and I also would care for her children or help her out when she needed.
And it was probably nice for both you and Nikki, since you both had kids and you're able to connect in that way.
Mm-hmm. And we worked together, so just being around each other enough.
And you were able to, did you talk and confide in each other?
A little, I wouldn't say, like best friends. Not a whole lot, but we shared some things, not super deep.
Would you say that you were able to grow closer to Nikki and also get to know Dylan as well as time went on?
Yeah, for the amount that we had.
So as you started to babysit Dylan, you started to spend more time with Nikki, correct?
Yes.
And you were able to talk about life in general and relationships?
Mm-hmm.
And Nikki talked to you about her relationship with Doug?
A little, but she wasn't one to indulge in her personal life.
Sure. And you were a good listener? You listened when she talked and it helped the friendship?
Yeah.
In a way you were able to be there for her and be another companion?
Sure, yeah.
But you were also able to witness her relationship with Doug firsthand.
I wouldn't say, I didn't live in the house or anything. I never really saw them together. So I wouldn't say that I could witness it entirely.
And there was times that you'd be over and you'd be with Nikki and Doug would be present per se, but he'd actually be sleeping in his room, correct?
That was the day that I came there. That was the first time that I've ever came to her house, was the day. And he was sleeping when I had came over in the morning, yes. And still sleeping when we came back from rummage sailing, yes.
And you had babysat Dylan before that day, correct?
At my house, yes.
And how often?
In the morning, she was a substitute teacher, so whenever she had to work, it was just starting out a few times a week, twice a week, and then went to 3 or 4. She was trying to get more work, just seeing how she would adapt to Dylan having a nanny and how she would do.
Who typically dropped Dylan off?
She would.
Who typically picked up Dylan?
She would.
And then she was typically the one providing anything that Dylan would need for that day?
I would think so, yes.
Now I want to focus specifically, you talked about that morning on, I believe that's the 20th. You and Nikki were trying to brainstorm ways to get Doug motivated.
Objection, Your Honor. Who we approach?
And Doug were working?
No, Doug wasn't
I'm gonna
working.
object on the relevancy of babysitting arrangements for this case.
How are the babysitting arrangements relevant, Attorney Sugar?
I think it goes into how Dallas is a part of this case, and
You're all right.
I'm going to sustain on relevance grounds. I think that we've already heard a significant amount of testimony as to how she got to know Nikki, how she came to babysit. I don't think discussion.
Babysitting Dylan that night, correct?
Yes.
And that's because Nikki and Doug went to a Steel Panther concert?
Yes.
Was Nikki excited to go out that night?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you
It was
know-
a date night. It was, something to do.
And you essentially relieved Nikki's mom on that night, correct?
Yes.
And you let Nikki know that Dylan was okay on that night when you got there?
I stayed in contact with her throughout the night, yes. When I got there, when he woke up, and that was the end of our conversations, yeah.
And why did you do that?
I just felt it in me to kind of give her a heads up, like, hey, I'm here, your mom left, and then also, hey, he woke up, I fed him, I changed him and put him to bed, and I'm going to sleep. And pretty much it's taken care of, good night, have fun.
In a way that offered some sort of reassurance to Nikki that Dylan was
For
okay?
sure, yes.
And it was pretty late that night, so I'm assuming you eventually fell asleep?
Yes, it was shortly after midnight when I sent the last message to her and I went to sleep.
And was Dylan sleeping at that time?
He was. He woke up for a brief moment. I rocked him back to sleep, fed him the rest of the bottle, and put him back in his bassinet upstairs.
And when you say upstairs, was that, do you know which room he was put in?
Their room,
And that's
the middle room, from the top of the stairs.
So then, focusing early on the morning of May 21st, I believe you woke up around 2:45 a.m.?
Correct.
What did you wake up to?
Them being extremely loud, walking into the house, just talking, repeating a phrase over and over. And I startledly woke up, I grabbed my phone, and I looked at the time right away, noticing that I had 3 missed calls.
Noise?
It was, it was very much alarming, especially for having a baby in the house and knowing that a babysitter's there to just come in so loud and, I don't know.
And what happened next?
Doug immediately asked if I had heard from Nikki. I was confused as because I would hear other footsteps and I said, isn't she with you? And he said, no, that's my friend Greg. And then he trailed in shortly after. And I was just scared because, again, I've never conversated with Doug and I've never met Greg. So me being in their home and just her not being around, I went to grab my clothes immediately by the kitchen table. And Greg repeatedly paced back and forth in the hallway and then went to the fridge to grab something to eat. Doug kind of chimed in with, "You're hungry?" And he grabbed a Go-Gurt at the time and ate that.
And so at that time, Greg's pacing around. What's Doug doing?
Doug is sitting in the love seat, pretty much sleeping. He was sitting in the love seat. And at this time, I'm at the kitchen table, which is directly behind the love seat. Attempting to grab my clothes and make my way out of the house, but I could feel that I wasn't kind of being able to go.
And then were Doug and Greg there talking about an argument that Doug had with Nikki?
Correct. They were talking about how she wanted to walk home. They just let her walk home. She wanted to walk home. She was upset. They got in an argument. Greg said he tried to calm her down. And he even grabbed Doug's phone and talked to her, but she didn't want to talk to him. And that was pretty much the end of their conversation, and the phone either had died or she had shut it off at that point.
And then Greg left around 3 a.m.?
Yes, he said he had to go.
And after Greg left, what did Doug do?
We proceeded to go over a few, just where could she be, just talking about like what happened, where is she, so just bantering back and forth. I had thrown out a few, like, is she with her sister, is she with, a few friends, Did she go to the next bar? Like, you know, shouting out anything. Where could she be? I don't know. Did she walk home? Did she walk over the bridge? Did you drive that way home? I pretty much spouted everything off in my head to him, and everything kept coming back, no, 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 no. So I finally had said, is she in the trunk of your car? And he looked at me and he goes, no.
Was that a weird response?
Sustained relevance, what she thinks. Go ahead.
You had testified earlier that Doug said he was concerned when he had arrived. Was it your interpretation when you're using the word concerned that Doug was concerned that Nikki was missing, or do you think it was that he was concerned that Nikki was with somebody else?
Objection. This is definitely calling for speculation.
This is something that this witness is allowed to testify the way she interpreted what she testified to on direct and on that night.
She can't read a person's mind. She can just say how they appear or their demeanor.
And that's the appearance of that conversation. How did that come off? Context matters.
This might be one of those moments, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to ask you just briefly to go to the jury room and we'll take this up.
Be thereafter.
Correct.
And what did Doug do next?
We sat there and talked about where she could have been, and just I kind of tried to reassure him that because she was breastfeeding, and Dylan was 9 months at the time, that, you know, she's been gone for a long time. She will be back any moment. Like, she's just, you know, her boobs are probably engorged and whatnot, and she's gonna come back to feed the baby. Like, don't worry. So we just kind of talked about that. Just, you know, she'll be home. She should be home any moment.
And what was his general demeanor?
He just kept saying, I'm very concerned. Keep calling her. I'm very concerned. Like, this doesn't make sense. And yeah, I was just, I was confused. I also just didn't want to be there. And I was trying to
Your Honor,
leave.
I'd ask that you just continue your answers to the question.
The question, you're kind of going beyond what the original question was, so I'll sustain the objection.
Thank you.
You can continue to ask further questions, Attorney Schuchert.
And what did you do next and why?
After when? I'm sorry?
So I believe Doug's sitting on the love seat and you just had the conversation. You were running through things or situations where Nikki could have been. So what did you do next?
I was grabbing my things, and while doing so, he had asked if I had a bowl to smoke.
And what does that mean?
Weed. He wanted marijuana. He had just came out and just was like, I need to relax. Do you have any marijuana on you? And I was like, actually I do.
And then what did he do?
He proceeded to smoke while sitting in the love seat, and he offered me, and I declined.
And what happened after that?
Just me trying to just be done with the night and kind of go, just like, okay, here, you do this, and I have to go. I really have to go. And then I proceeded to walk to the front door. I put my hand on the door handle, and he called my name out to the point of startling. I'm right when I was about to leave, and he had asked, he goes, Dallas. And I said, yes, Doug. And he goes, can you come back here? Can I hit that one more time? And I go, next time. And he's like, you're right, okay. And I opened the door, and I ran for my car.
And how did you feel at that point?
Just out of place. And I don't know, just an urge to get out of the house.
And then what did you do next?
I locked my door. I looked around the cul-de-sac. It was quiet. I stared into the garage. It was open. The light was on. And I just asked, where are you, Nikki?
And then you drove home?
I slowly drove down the road where the roundabout is to the police station road, which would be Hoffman, is that correct? Took a left. I drove very slowly down that road. I went down Libel Street, took a right, and then my house at the time was a few blocks down the road. So I only made 3 turns from their house to going home.
Okay, and when you were driving home, you were actively looking for Nikki while you drove home?
The streets were very quiet. It was a little after 3 in the morning. There was no cars that had passed me. There's nobody on the road.
And then when you said that you got in your car, you said you locked your doors?
I was just frightened, yeah.
I have no further questions.
Any redirect, Attorney Kerrigan Maris?
We have nothing further. We ask that she be excused. Thank you very much.
All right. Step down, Dallas. Thank you.